So good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. I'd first like to acknowledge the folks who are standing with me. My traveling buddy, where is he? Alderman Scott, Chairman of the City Council Committee on Child Development. I think we spent most of last summer and fall together, and we're back. We're getting the gang back together, as well as our outstanding CPS CEO Dr. Janice Jackson, Commissioner Allison Arwady, who's steering us through this very challenging time with the pandemic. I also want to acknowledge CPS's Chief Education Officer, Dr. LaTanya McDade, CPS Chief Operating Officer, Arnie Rivera, and my Deputy Mayor for Education and Human Services, Dr. Sybil Madison, as well as Patricia Brakey, who's a principal at Back of the Yard College Prep High School. Thank you, Principal, for being here. And CPS parent, Shonda Hall. We are gathered here to take the next step in our community-wide discussion on how we ensure children stay safe, stay engaged, and resume learning when our school year begins this fall. And we're starting that discussion with the release of the preliminary framework for the 2020-2021 CPS school year. This discussion, which will continue over the next few weeks, is critically important. CPS must and will continue engaging the entire school community, stakeholders, notably parents and teachers. Now, it's clear nothing about this crisis has been easy, and that is especially true for our parents, many of whom were already barely making ends meet before this crisis began and have shouldered a significant burden. And since then have had to become, all at once, their kids' teachers, TAs, tutors, and more. And I know that as a parent of a rising 7th grader myself. This has been uncharted territory for all of us. And as we saw back in March, when COVID-19 fully entered our city, the safety precautions that forced us to close our schools then immediately raised an array of new challenges, including how we ensure that our children are fed every day, how in a matter of days to develop a new remote learning curriculum, and how to ensure our students have the digital resources they need to access and participate in online learning. And I'm tremendously proud of how CPS really rose to meet the challenge along the way. And that's thanks to the scores of not only administrators that you see here today, but also teachers and parents and administrators and countless others who have gone above and beyond the call of duty, not only to care for our kids, but to set them up for continued learning and success. From our first days of standing up food distribution sites at schools to our recently announced Chicago Connected, which will provide free, high-speed internet service to the homes of approximately 100,000 CPS students. Now we are laying the groundwork for our newest challenge in this crisis, and that is how we ensure our children stay safe, continue learning, and remain engaged as we enter the start of the school year beginning September 8th. The reality is we have to be ready for any possibility. COVID-19 has been unpredictable from the start, and we have a responsibility to be prepared for what the public health indicators dictate, whether that means remote learning, in-person learning, or something in between. In approaching this challenge, our single highest priority has been what it's always been: protecting the physical safety of our students as well as our school faculty and staff. And following a process which began as far back as March and included evaluating a variety of potential instructional models, we are evaluating a hybrid model. Such a model will combine learning from home and learning at school. And of course, any model chosen must meet all necessary health and safety guidelines outlined by public health officials like Dr. Arwady. And I want to take this opportunity to make it clear to every parent up front that there will be options for you. As I mentioned before, this is a framework to serve as a jumping off point for the next stage of engagement with the entire school community. And we need your feedback in order to arrive at the strongest possible plan. That's why over the next 2 weeks, CPS will step up its engagement with all stakeholders in order to ensure that everyone's voices are heard. The benefit of this framework is that it offers us the flexibility to meet the unique circumstances of individual students and schools, while also being ready to activate full-time learning from home in the event that our public health officials determine at-school learning is not advised. This framework also builds on the lessons learned and investments made since our school buildings first closed their doors in March. Now, I want to underscore, this is a dialogue that will require all of us to confront a challenge that no one has faced before. And in doing so, we must look at this situation honestly and boldly and ask ourselves, what is the right path to make sure that our kids continue to learn, continue to progress in a safe and nurturing environment? Given that reality, we must do for our children and our school communities everything that we can to mitigate the risk with every tool in our toolbox. And the reality is, even in this room today, every time we wake up, and even in our homes, there is risk. And what our job is to mitigate that risk. And I want every parent to know that we are focused and determined to do everything possible to build a safe and nurturing learning environment for your children, whether virtual or hybrid. And that means having a plan in place for incidents of COVID-19 spread when they occur, and they will occur. It also means our city's employers to continue to remain as flexible as possible with parent schedules once the school year begins, and we've already started that conversation as well. The problem we are wrestling with is the same one that every school district across America is facing. And the good news is that because of our city's disciplined, data-driven, collaborative efforts, we are in a far better place to confront these challenges compared to some of our peer cities across the country. But whatever happens, and whatever form this challenge takes, I want everyone to know that education will happen this fall. School will happen this fall. And learning for our children, the lifeblood of their ability to learn and advance and progress, will be happening this fall. And to our parents, I want you to know that we are acutely aware of how challenging this circumstance has been for you. Many of us standing here, and many who are involved in this decision, are parents of school-aged children. We know that from the physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, and most of all, mental stress that you all have been going through. And that goes double for our working parents, our single parents, and all who don't have the resources you need to work to keep your bills paid, food on the table, and be there for your family when they need you. We want you to know that we understand and we hear you, and we are doing everything we can to lighten your burden and ensure your children and your families have what they need to get the education they deserve in a safe and responsible way. To all of our teachers, we know also we have been asking a lot from you. We know that you are stressed out and feeling the weight of this moment from every direction. And many of you are parents of school-aged children. And some of you fall into our vulnerable populations for whom the risk is most acute. And some of you, like many of our residents, are scared and uncertain. And my commitment, truly our commitment, is to continue listening, ensure that your voices as teachers are heard as we continue down this path together. The same goes for our principals and support staff, many of whom have been working in the physical schools every single day during this pandemic. And that's why we need the entirety of the school community to be part of this conversation. It's critical that we all come together and work together to address the challenges for our kids and to keep everyone safe. That means all of us stepping up and doing the right thing in this moment and this challenge in our city, just as we've done together over the past 5 months. And we will continue to do so until we have a vaccine and we are finally able to relegate COVID-19 to the history books. But for now, because it is part of our present and our future, we have to come together and make sure that we are united in a single focus of making sure that we live up to the commitment and the obligation that we owe our children. We will work to get through this. I am confident that we will. And we welcome the conversation and the input that we will now be hearing in more formal way through our school community. And at this point, I invite Dr. Jackson to come to the podium to offer a few words. Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot. All right. Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot, and good morning, everyone. As you know, I've been an educator in Chicago Public Schools for more than 20 years. And while my prior experiences as a teacher, principal, and network chief have informed this preliminary framework that we're presenting today, no role has weighed into my decision-making than that role of being a CPS parent. In March, my two children were among the hundreds of thousands of students whose bedrooms became classrooms suddenly due to the pandemic. Like many parents all over this city, I was concerned about them missing out on key milestones. I was, of course, concerned about their social emotional needs and social interactions, and I was very concerned about them being prepared for the next school year. Now, as we prepare for another unprecedented school year, keeping our students safe is still a top priority. In preparation for the fall, we created a reopening task force that included a diverse amount of voices from all across the city to help us create the plan and the framework that you are seeing today. That also included principals like Principal Brecky, who is here with us today from Back of the Yards High School, as well as other administrators across the city. We all agree collectively that the health and safety of our students and staff must come first. The task force was made up of many incredible individuals who moved mountains and made really tough decisions to ensure that we had continuous learning this upcoming school year. As Mayor Lightfoot explained, we believe that a hybrid model will be the best model to meet the needs of all of our students throughout the city. This model allows many of our students to reap the benefits that they can only achieve through in-person instruction in front of a highly qualified teacher. This plan is aligned with other school systems across the country whose health conditions or health situation is similar to ours. I am in constant contact with leaders all over the country and making sure that our plan is aligned with best practices. In order to ensure proper social distancing, the majority of our kindergarten through 10th grade students will split their time between learning at home and learning at school. But we are also differentiating the amount of in-person instruction for students based on their age and developmental needs. For example, pre-K students and special education students in our cluster programs will go to school daily, while most of our high school juniors and seniors will learn at home for most of their time. This is due to the complexity of their schedules and our inability to keep the pods stable at a high school level because their schedules differ greatly. Schools will provide in-person instruction on a daily basis to the maximum extent possible for our English language learners and our diverse learners in grades kindergarten through 10th. And our high school students that are juniors and seniors who are in career and technical education programs or those who need additional academic or SEL support will also be prioritized in the individual school plans. This plan also allows teachers to support students so that they can reach their full potential. And above all else, it puts their health and safety first. The district has purchased over 1.2 million face coverings for our students and staff, more than 42,000 hand sanitizer dispensers, more than 40,000 containers of disinfectant wipes, and more than 22,000 infrared thermometers to protect our students and staff while learning at school. As a CPS parent, hearing these investments is reassuring. But I know that most parents across this city really are wondering, what will instruction look like? So let me give you an example. If a student is scheduled to learn in person on any given day, before they even leave their home, they will be required to complete a health screener before showing up to school. At the beginning of the school day, we will stagger start times to minimize contact. Students will be assigned to pods or groups with no more than 15 students at a time, and these pods will stay together with the same group of teachers throughout the entire school year. They will receive instruction in assigned classrooms, in assigned seating, and each pod will have its own individual classroom. Teachers and students will be required to wear masks all day and will make routine trips to the designated bathroom to wash their hands and use hand sanitizer. Areas of the school where multiple pods will engage, such as the lunchroom or gymnasium, will be cleaned thoroughly and disinfected in between use. And when the school day is over, students will exit the building with their assigned pods through designated doors. All in all, most pods will learn at school 2 days per week, and then learn independently at home 2 days per week. And then we will have 1 day of real-time virtual classroom instruction led by a teacher. Ideally, this will be on every Wednesday when real-time virtual instruction will be provided for our students. Our buildings will be closed so that we can go through a thorough and deep cleaning to ensure that the building is safe for the pod that will be returning the following day. While we will only bring students back into the classrooms when it's safe, we are preparing to take extraordinary steps because the benefits of learning in person are so profound. But let me be clear, there is no replacing a loving teacher and learning with your friends. We know that there are many academic benefits to having in-person school, but let us not forget the many social and emotional benefits for students when they engage in a positive learning environment. We want this framework to start as a conversation, a jumping off point, as Mayor Lightfoot said in her remarks. And it's important that we hear directly from school communities and parents who will be making this critical decision for their children. You will hear from one of those parents today, Ms. Shonda Hall, who will share her remarks on how she's thinking about the upcoming school year and really going through the process that all of us parents are thinking about. Community engagement will be extremely important, and that's why it's critically important that we hear directly from our school communities as we finalize this plan. Since educating our students was turned on its head in March, our approach has always been about taking steps forward. The resilience of our teachers and principals in creating learning plans on the fly was a step forward. The hard work of our parents who were suddenly turned into teachers and engaged in remote learning was a step forward. Standing up an apparatus to feed over 15 million, to serve over 15 million meals through our grab-and-go sites was a step forward. And providing broadband access to families in need through the Chicago Connected program was a significant step forward that will support this plan, but also support our students for years to come. We hope that today is another step forward that will allow us to work in collaboration with our families and communities so we can put together the best possible plan to ensure the health and safety of our students and also prioritize learning. At this time, I now welcome Ms. Shonda Hall, a fellow CPS parent, to the podium to share remarks. Ms. Hall?
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Thank you, Madam Lightfoot, for this opportunity. My name is Shonda Hall. I'm a CPS parent. I have a little heart at Willicatha Elementary. She is my little heartbeat. Willicatha is in the East Garfield Park community. When I think about goals and dreams for next school year for my little heartbeat, I think about education and safety. What's most important right now for myself as well as many parents is health and safety. That's probably what is important to myself as well as Dr. Jackson and every other parent, as I've already stated. We have to be honest. COVID-19 is real, it's serious, and it's taking lives. It is unlike anything we have ever experienced. It has hit many communities, including my own, very hard, very fast. There's no magic button here that we will hit that will make the virus go away. Right now, it is important to worry about keeping our students safe. Is going to require a well thought out plan that unites LSEs, parent boards, BACs, community leaders, and other organizations. Working with our CPS leaders is going to be very important at this time. The plan to reopen schools should allow for flexibility. It should be rooted in equality. It needs to be prioritized both with students' academic and social and emotional needs, allowing all else. It needs to put safety first. The district plan has been created with all of those needs in mind. It's a strong plan and it's a starting point. While I am pleased with the cautions taking an approach that Madam Lightfoot and Dr. Jackson have put together. I hope more parents will also take advantage of the opportunity to contribute in the process. This means opening those emails, clicking those surveys, volunteering a few minutes of your time to do those virtual meetings that they're hosting. The FACE department is hosting many meetings. They are free, they are virtual. There's no contact with COVID when you're doing things virtual. So from one parent to many others, I highly recommend that you open the emails, respond, let your voices be heard. Parents have a powerful, powerful voice. These are our children. COVID-19 is real. Take a moment of your time to work with our CPS leaders and make sure our students have a great school year. Thank you for this space. Next, we will have Miss Principal Patricia from Back of the Yards High School.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Patty Brecky, and I'm the principal of Back of the Yards College Prep on Chicago's Southwest Side. I'm also a member of the district's reopening task force, alongside other principals from across the district. As we've worked together to develop innovative solutions for the upcoming school year, we've talked about how much we miss hearing and seeing our students and staff in the hallways and that buzz of the building that keeps us alive. Still, what always comes back is the health and safety of our students and staff, that it has to come first. As the principal of a high school with over 1,000 students, and with COVID-19 continuing to impact the Back of the Yards community as well as other communities across Chicago, it would not feel right to have all of my students come back to the building in the fall, no matter how much I miss them. That's why, if Dr. Arwady and our public health officials say that it's safe to reopen schools, the district's hybrid model strikes me as the right balance to be able to do so. While my upperclassmen may not need to come into the building every day, it's my hope that having some face-to-face time and instruction will help set the tone for my freshman and sophomore students. It will help us continue to build school culture, and most importantly, it will help them how to learn at home efficiently and effectively. Above all else, the district's comprehensive cleaning protocol and resources will ensure that my students and my staff are as safe as possible when they're learning in school and when they're learning at home. In some ways, the beginning of next school year will feel like we're picking up right where we left off. However, the big difference here is time. We need time to work together to create the best possible plan for returning to school in the fall, should public health conditions allow for us to return. That is why it's so important for families and community members to share their feedback on this preliminary framework. I know that much of my own thinking as part of the task force has been informed and influenced by my school community. I've been extremely proud of my school community and watching them come together to support our students during these unprecedented circumstances. Now I believe that we have to keep working together to make sure that the safety of our students and staff comes first when we come back in the fall. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Ellison Arwady.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for the work that you've put in. Good morning. I'm here today not only as the Commissioner of the Chicago Department of Public Health, but as a licensed pediatrician. My top priority, the top priority of the mayor, of Dr. Jackson, of all of the educators and administrators of CPS, is the health and safety of our students and the whole school community. I commend CPS and all of the many people for their thoughtful approach in developing this framework, recognizing that when it comes to COVID-19, we have to plan now for all possibilities. Right now, as of July 17th, our local outbreak remains broadly in control in Chicago. And in that context, CDPH does support a hybrid framework that includes an in-person classroom learning option with all of the many safeguards proposed. Obviously, we're watching our local data very closely. COVID is not over, and it will not be over for many, many, many months to come. And as we said earlier this week, our new case count is just beginning to increase again after 2 straight months of very steep declines. Please know that if 1 month from now, 2 months from now, 6 months from now, our local data worsen to a point where we could not support in-classroom learning or needed to dial back other interactions, we would not hesitate to make that difficult recommendation. But right now, for so many reasons, we are pleased to be talking about school this fall. Returning to school is about so much more than academics. We know that schools play such a crucial role in the development, the well-being, and the overall health of our children. Schools provide the opportunity for young people to have more caring adults become part of their lives, to inspire, challenge, and support them. It provides the opportunity for students to learn social and emotional skills, to get healthy meals and exercise, to receive mental health support, more important now than ever. Many of these important services just are not easily replicated online. It's a critical time for young people when minds and bodies are still developing. Lack of access to these services can also potentially have a long-lasting impact. We've seen here in Chicago the ways that COVID-19 has highlighted the racial and social inequities present in our city and in our country. If children are not able to attend school in person, especially over long time periods, we do risk further worsening those gaps. The hard truth is that many children in less resourced communities may not have as many opportunities for learning and development outside of school as children in better resourced communities. CPS and so many others have been working and bringing amazing results to address structural gaps. But besides academics, some children still may not have full access to internet or healthy food options. Children with disabilities or special needs may be missing badly needed therapy sessions, interpersonal connections, the list goes on. So throughout this pandemic, we've been watching the data every single day. We have been making adjustments all along the way, directing resources where they're most needed, and where it's been necessary, limiting gatherings, pulling back, and taking other necessary precautions. We will do the same with our schools. The reality is that no place, no situation, in or out of school that includes any interaction with other people is entirely risk-free from COVID. Kids need interaction for healthy development. Younger children in particular just do not learn as well through screens. So the most important thing is that any plan for in-person classroom education have as many precautions in place as possible, like you've heard, as well as solid plans that would limit the spread of COVID when the inevitable cases are detected. That's why CDPH has been working closely with CPS to develop this framework that prioritizes the well-being of students and staff, and that we now want your input on. School is fundamental to the physical, mental, and emotional growth of our children. And like so many other things, school is going to look different this year, here in Chicago and around the country. But as our local framework continues to evolve with important input from the community, please know, as a pediatrician, as the public health commissioner, I will not endorse any plan that I believe jeopardizes the health of students, teachers, or school administrators. I know we all share the goal of doing what's best for all of our children, all of Chicago's children, as we return to school this fall. And with that, I'd like to invite Alderman Scott. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. As she said, I am Alderman Michael Scott. I am chair of the City Council's Education Committee. But more importantly, I am a father of 3 school-age CPS children. And I share the concerns that everybody shares about getting our children back in school. And I have lived personally the new normal that has become schools in Chicago. Myself, I have been a counselor and a teacher and the lunchroom man, and I know why the show on Fox, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, got canceled, because a lot of days I am not. And so it has been really hard doing all the things that are necessary to make sure that our children continue to maintain their educational focus. But I am glad to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the people who are behind me, who are crafting the plan to make sure that our children get back to their educational norms, but not just the education, to make sure that their health and safety is in the forefront. And like our parent, Ms. Hall, talked about, education for parents is not a participatory sport. You cannot sit on the sidelines and say, this is wrong with CPS, this is wrong with the learning. We invite you and encourage you to be a part of this conversation. CPS has put together a very thorough, comprehensive way to get parents engaged and their voices heard around how to get your children back in school and how to get them in safety. But it is incumbent upon you as a parent to make sure that your voice is heard and to make sure you're saying what your challenges are and how we get through those challenges. And we invite you to the table to do that. With that being said, I'm going to invite Dr. Jackson and Mayor Lightfoot back to the podium to address any questions. Thank you.
Mayor, thank you.
How are you, Marianne?
I'm good. Yesterday, we heard from the teachers' union, and there was, at one point, their attorney who said no one can force the teachers back into the classroom if they don't feel it's safe. Are you concerned that this might end up in some kind of legal battle or even a strike?
No.
How are you going to ensure to the teachers it's definitely safe to come back in?
Well, look, as Doctor already said, even in your household, when you're interacting with another human being, there are risks. Our job is to make sure that we mitigate those risks, particularly in the school setting. Dr. Jackson and her team have been engaged with the CTU and teachers throughout this process. They will continue to do so. There'll be plenty of opportunity for that discussion to continue, and I'm confident it will be productive.
Sarah Schulte from WLS. Considering each school has its own physical footprint, why not let each school make its own decision about in-school or e-learning?
Well, I think if you read the framework, that flexibility is absolutely baked into that. That's part of the reason why we're saying this is a framework, because it is. It's the start of a formal discussion. The decisions about social distancing and so forth obviously have to reflect the realities of what the school footprint is, but also the school population. That's why schools will have a tremendous amount of flexibility to make sure that the plan that is chosen makes sense for their particular school community.
Nader from the Chicago Sun-Times. How will schools deal with the challenge of having young kids who are 7 and 8 years old keeping their masks on for 6 hours a day or agreeing to stay socially distant?
I think I'll bring up Dr. Jackson to talk about that. But obviously, I know, right? Thank you, Mayor. But obviously, that is one of the things that we're anticipating. Young children like to congregate. They like to be with their buddies, and recognizing that. But I think also Dr. Artie will probably have something to say about this in terms of what we've seen regarding this virus. But that's why, as Dr. Jackson said, we're talking about smaller pods. They'll continue to be a part of that throughout the course of that. And so we believe that based upon the science, that's one of the safest ways that we can keep those young children in particular safe. That's the thing that's being used in camps, not only here in Chicago, but really throughout the country. Smaller sizes, keeping that pod together. That's why we think that part of it will be an important part of bringing particularly those younger children together. Doctor, why don't you start?
Thank you for that one.
Dr. Artie, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, all right. No,
my pleasure.
No, I think we underestimate how students adapt. I know from working in schools, oftentimes children adapt faster than adults. And so what we've seen from other countries that have reopened schools is that children are able to do this. At the end of the day, everybody understands the threat of COVID, even our youngest learners. And so I feel confident that through the mitigation strategies that we already have in place, plus trust the smaller pods, that we will be able to ensure their safety. And again, we're going to be requiring parents and asking parents to help us with that too. I think the more we explain the threat, our students will rise to the occasion, as they do oftentimes.
New York City has, Dr. Arwady.
Sure. I'll just add briefly that, I have nieces and nephews this age, and when you model this behavior for children and set it as an expectation, they actually do very well with it, in my experience. I think we recognize that children in this youngest group are not always going to be able to be socially distant. We set the framework, we really set that expectation, but the goal of those smaller pods is really to recognize that if there were to be a case, that would not have major effects throughout the whole school. But frankly, I actually think kids, in a lot of ways, like to help police adults on this. The kids like to, remind folks to wear their masks and give their elbows and have the good behavior. And we've seen it done perfectly well in other countries. I absolutely think our students can rise to the challenge as well.
As long as you're there, Dr. Arwady, can students and the parents and the teachers expect this plan to be in place in the fall and in the winter, when the public health experts expect cases to rise again with the flu season?
Yeah, so like I said, one of I think the strongest parts about this framework is that it has planned for all possibilities. So it does include in there the hybrid model, which is where we feel with what our outbreak is right now would be an appropriate place to begin. But there are details in there about what it would look like if we needed to move to an entirely virtual setting or to an entirely in-person setting, where we think about potentially a vaccine maybe being available, or our cases maybe being in very good control in a best case scenario further down the line. So we will continue to look at the data. We will continue to be as forward looking as we can and give people as much time to plan as necessary. My hope is that we can keep things in control in Chicago, even with the flu season. If people continue to do the things that we know work, if they get their flu vaccines, if we're not seeing that big impact on the hospitals, my hope is we would be able to continue this throughout the year. But really, time will tell, as it has every month so far in this outbreak.
Thank you. Mayor, in New York City, where their district has a similar plan to Chicago's, it just announced free childcare for 100,000 students. Is that something the city will consider for working class families who depend on school not only for education, but a place for their kids to be during work hours?
We are absolutely looking at a number of different ways in which we can support working families and providing them options that don't add to their financial burden, but do it in a way that keeps their children safe. So we have to do that. We recognize that a lot of parents don't have the luxury of being able to stay home, and so we need to make sure that we provide the supports. So that will be part of the continued work. We've been looking at this for a while. I definitely took note of what New York City announced, but we will absolutely be providing supports for our families.
Sarah Karp from WBEZ is asking, how much will putting this hybrid plan in place cost?
That's a good question. I don't have the specific numbers, but our hope is that it's relatively net budget neutral. We obviously know that there's going to be some additional costs incurred, and Dr. Jackson and her team have been working on that, but we don't see this as substantially increasing the size of the CPS budget. Dr. Jackson, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. You may recall last year we got authorization from the board to respond to COVID at around $75 million, I presume. And so the mayor's point about net neutral on our budget is that we will try to stay within that range. So in our operating budget that the board will be voting on next month, we're trying to stay within that range to support. Majority of those dollars are going to be spent on the health protocols that we talked about earlier, the sanitizer, the thermometers, et cetera. And we will also be spending some money to provide substitute services in many of our schools to support them in implementing their plan.
Could you, as long as you're there, a question from Amy Jacobson about why 9 and 10 grades in school, 11 and 12 not? Explain that.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time thinking about how to maximize class time for students. I think there were a couple of things. First of all, that transition to high school is critically important, so getting our 9th graders in and having them there as much as possible was important. But at the 9th and 10th grade level, the schedules of the students are pretty similar. Many of them are taking general education courses. At the 11th and 12th grade, across the district, across all schools, schedules are so different, it would be hard to maintain the pods that we had talked about earlier. And so we think that that was the safest way. We also know that older students are more adept at working in a remote setting and staying on pace and progressing their learning than some of our younger students.
And what about sports and extracurriculars besides
Yeah.
sports? All of those,
Yeah,
what happens?
so with regard to sports, we did put out our return to play plan, which we are implementing now. Again, total flexibility there. Many of our schools launched their plans and things are going well. We're waiting to see IHSA's decision on fall sports. We're watching closely what, of course, the collegiate sports programs are doing, what the professional sports programs are doing. But once we hear from them, we'll make our final decision, or it will be in alignment with that decision. As far as after-school programming, we're still working on that. We've gotten a lot of questions about that. We got a lot of questions about that from our principals when we talked to them today. And I think that's one of those places where we're hoping parents are going to weigh in and let us know more about the needs and what type of programming they would like to see.
Also from WBEZ, from the survey of teachers and staff, do you have any idea of an estimate of how many staff might want to take a leave of absence? What if hundreds or thousands of teachers apply for a leave of absence because they have medical or caretaking needs?
Yeah.
Could this result in a difficult problem for all of you?
Let me say a couple things about the surveying. Number one, our plan is prioritizing the health and safety of our staff, and so we will be allowing for staff members who have medical conditions that preclude them from coming back into a setting like this. They definitely will get those modifications and the approved FMLAs that fall into place with that. As far as surveying, we administered a survey to our families across the city, and majority of our parents said that they wanted an option for their kids to return to school, and majority of them also indicated that this hybrid model was a favorable model for them. So I think it's going to be important that we continue to survey people. We're launching one today so people can respond to this plan, but we also want people to know that we do have protocols in place, and that if people have pre-existing conditions that require those type of accommodations, those will be granted. The expectation will be that everybody else comes to work.
Can I ask you as well, from the Tribune, they're asking for the pods that you spoke about. Are these students going to be using hallways or change rooms throughout the day, or do they essentially remain in the same classroom for all subjects?
They will be assigned to a classroom that only that pod will use. The expectation is that they will spend almost all of their time there, with the exception of the bathroom breaks that I mentioned, and in some cases if they have to use the lunchroom or other spaces like outdoors or the gymnasium. But the expectation is to be contained in that room as much as possible.
Are the buses going to be running regular routes?
The buses will be running regular routes, but we will be honoring social distancing, so we are making adjustments related to that. So you'll hear more about that, and our parents who use transportation will be hearing more about that in the coming week.
Dr. Arwady, question for you from Telemundo. What health protocols would schools follow if there's a positive case of coronavirus from a student or a CPS employee?
Yes, so we've done a lot of work in planning, again, looking at how this has been addressed around the country, around the world, and based on some of the own local knowledge that we have here. So it really depends, and that's often my answer when it comes to COVID. A single case that is in a pod would generally result in that pod being quarantined for the 14 days with, extensive cleaning and follow-on. It would sort of go up from there. If we started to see additional cases, for example, in more than one pod, we might make a different decision. And if we started to see cases in, potentially 3 pods, for example, sort of across different areas within a short time period, we would make larger decisions at the school. But the goal, again, is to put health and safety first, be aggressive in terms of containing any risk for COVID, and responding when we would have the cases that we do, again, expect that we would have. We think it's a good balance between mitigating risk and meeting really the needs of students.
We talked a little bit about the cost of these investments, but including the janitorial hires and buying computers and iPads, are you using any money from the CARES Act or federal funding? That question from A.D. Quinn.
Yep. Yes, obviously, we are utilizing those dollars, and we are also anticipating, like every other school district across the country, additional support from the federal government to support school reopening. And I'm glad you brought up the point about additional staffing. I didn't mention that earlier, but we will be hiring on 400 additional custodians to support the work that it's going to take to keep our schools clean.
Mayor, could we also move over to the news of the day of what's happening in about an hour or less than an hour with the U.S. Attorney? Can we get your reaction to learning that Mike Madigan is named as Public Official A? You, of course, as a former prosecutor. Should Mike Madigan resign? Should he remain the head of the Democratic Party?
Well, that's not really for me to say, and as mayor, what I'm really focused on is the conduct of ComEd. And since this story broke last year, I've consistently said that ComEd is going to have to come before the Chicago City Council and give account for its conduct. The deferred prosecution agreement that was filed earlier today lays out in great detail a factual basis of conduct on the part of ComEd that I think is concerning. The City Council's Environment and Energy Committee will be hosting a committee hearing on July 30th, and it's my expectation that the chairman will call upon ComEd officials to come and answer detailed and I think tough questions, and rightfully so, about what conduct they've engaged in. We need to understand that as in the midst of negotiating a franchise agreement with ComEd, we need to understand what their conduct has been and the commitments that they have made to the government and really to the city to make sure that we are doing business with an honest vendor.
What further effect then will that? Are you saying that the ComEd, that the city should cut ties with
No,
ComEd?
what I'm saying is, in the first instance, we need to better understand beyond the four corners of the deferred prosecution agreement what happened and what's in place now to stop it from preventing, and then we will go from there. But the first and most important thing is ComEd needs to come in on July 30th and testify before the City Council and answer some questions.
Yeah, you know, you previously dismissed the idea, apparently, this is according to Becky Beebe of WBEZ. But are you reconsidering should Chicago cut ties?
Well, look, it's a big and huge, and essentially what that question is can the Chicago city government take on the responsibility of generation and provision of electricity? That's an enormous and costly undertaking. Now, we're in the midst of a study on that very issue, and it will be finalized here shortly. But I don't take lightly the prospects of trying to run an electric utility. That's not within our wheelhouse. But obviously, we initiated this study so we can look at what our options were, see what was realistic, and we'll wait for the study's results.
When Rod Blagojevich was named Public Official A, there was a huge call for him to step down immediately. Mm-hmm. Today, I don't hear that from you about Mike Madigan. Why does he have such Teflon?
Well, again, it's not for me as the mayor of the city to talk about whether or not the Speaker of the General Assembly should or shouldn't take certain action. As far as I know, there's not been any charges against him, but that really, need not be the standard. As I said, my focus is on making sure that ComEd gives us a full accounting of what their conduct was as laid out in the deferred prosecution. And it's important that we understand what safeguards and controls they have in place. Now, there's been a tremendous turnover in the leadership of ComEd since these allegations came to light. And I think we have to understand that. And we'll find out more at that July 30th hearing.
And finally, the last question, Kaylee McEnany, you called her Karen. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. Look, what we've seen, and unfortunately what we're going to continue to see, is the Trump administration obviously thinks that they will score some political points by trying to demonize and make Democratic mayors, particularly women mayors, like myself, Mira Bowser, Keisha Lance Bottoms of Atlanta, Jenny Durkin of Seattle, they think that they're going to take us on and make us look bad because that'll score points with their base. And to that, I've said, and I'll say again, good luck. The mayors are getting it done. In absence of incredible void of leadership from the president and his team, who want to change the subject from the failed leadership, and it's not just failed leadership, the fact that they have not stepped up and led in this incredible pandemic has literally cost people lives. The fact that the president has equivocated about the seriousness of COVID-19, the fact that he refuses to wear a face covering in public and has mocked people for doing so, the fact that he has lied repeatedly about the resources that the federal government will provide for testing, for contact tracing, and now he's trying to marginalize and demonize the CDC, for God's sake. Where is the bottom here? Where is the bottom? We need change. And I don't want to make a political commercial here, but why I support Joe Biden is because he is absolutely the opposite of what we've seen from Donald Trump. And this won't be the last time that his flacks will try to take me on, but good luck. I'm still here. I'm going to lead this city as best I can, and we are going to get the job done to protect residents of the city, whether or not the president ever steps up or not. And the silliness of, oh, we sent her a letter. Look at the letter. It's just a litany of nonsense written by some political flack. And if you really wanted to help the city, let's start with the fact that you would weigh in, Mr. President, on common sense gun support and reform. It makes no sense that people can still buy automatic weapons. It makes no sense that people from Chicago can go across the border to Indiana and buy military-grade weapons and bring them back to our city and kill our children. If you really want to help, there are real specific things that I have repeatedly laid out from the beginning of this administration if you really want to help. But he doesn't really want to help. What he wants to do is use me and this city and other cities across the country as punching bags, and I'm not having it, period.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Marianne. Thanks, everyone.